Hey, First Baptist Church family and friends, it's Pastor Travis, and here we find ourselves at the end of another week. And I wanted to take just a few moments to offer a word of challenge as well as a word of encouragement to each of you. You know, through the last several weeks, one of the questions that I'm asked often in different conversations is, Travis, what do you think it is that the Lord is trying to tell us? And it's obvious the background behind that question is the situation that we find ourselves currently in with facing this pandemic and our being shut down in a sense that our children are no longer in school and having to do online training or studying from home, and we're working from home and we can't meet on our campuses for worship. And certainly there's a lot of disruption to our everyday lives. And not only with this pandemic, but if you look in just the last few days, there's been tornadoes that have broken out. It seems like if not every day, at least every week, there's earthquakes that are reported throughout the world. And so a lot of times when we see these types of catastrophic events, it causes us to pause and ask that question: what is it that the Lord is trying to tell us? You know, that question reminds me of an experience that Elijah, a prophet in the Old Testament, had himself. And it's recorded for us in 1 Kings. He had built an altar and was in competition, if you will, with the prophets of Baal to see who really was God. And ultimately, the prophets of Baal failed when they cried out to their God, to Baal. But then ultimately, when Elijah cried out for God, fire came from heaven, a very spectacular event, and consumed the altar. It was a wonderful demonstration of God's power and authority, and a victory not only for God's people, but in Elijah's life. But following that, Jezebel, who was the wife of the king at that time, threatened Elijah's life. And out of fear, he ran and hid in a cave. And it's recorded for us in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 11. It says this: Then he said, Go out, stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. You have three catastrophic events: a wind that was strong enough to blow the rocks off of the mountainside, an earthquake, obviously, that shook the earth, and then a fire that came. And it says, but in all those three catastrophic events, God was not in those. But then it closes by saying this: but in a still small voice. It was in a still small voice that God spoke. And so I want you to know today that yes, when we asked ourselves a question, what is it that God is trying to say to us through these catastrophic events that we find ourselves in? Yes, the Lord does get our attention. But what God wanted Elijah to know, and also wants us to know, is that it's not always in those catastrophic events that he's trying to speak to us. Yes, get our attention, but he is a personal and intimate God that speaks in a still small voice. In the footnotes of my Bible, it says a delicate whisper. The psalm writer says it this way in Psalm 62, verses 5 and 6. My soul. He's speaking to his own self. My soul wait in silence for God only. For my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I shall not be shaken. And so my encouragement to each of us, as we look at the events, these spectacular events, these dramatic events that are happening all around us, realize, yes, God is trying to get our attention, but it's in that personal, quiet time in his word, when we're still before him in prayer and reading his word, that he is able to speak and we're able to hear and respond in obedience. I want to encourage you that as we move through the balance of this week, that you take that opportunity in your own personal time to be still and to be quiet before the Lord. As the psalm writer says, My soul wait in silence for God only. And as you're still, that God in that still, in that quiet voice will speak His truth, His mercy, and His grace into your life. Let me remind you that on the Lord's Day, this Sunday, we'll have the privilege of coming together for worship online. And again, our online worship is at 10:30. You can find the information how you can connect to that on our Facebook page and also on our website page. Some of you inquired about having a printable outline. We've shared with you that's available on YouVersion app, the Bible app, but we have been able to put up a printable version of that sermon outline, and you can access that again on our Facebook, also on our website page. And so if you'll go to those locations, you'll be able to find that information. God bless you. I pray that you'll enjoy the rest of your week, and I look forward to the time that we'll share together in worship.